Happy, cheeky and bright 6-year-old Arthur Labinjo-Hughes had dreams of becoming a professional footballer. The youngster captured here with his uncle Blake, talking of his future.
Arthur, are you going to play for England? No, why not?
After when I played for Liverpool, I can play for Tottenham.
So you're going to play for Liverpool, then Tottenham. What about England?
After when I'm in Tottenham.
The gentle-natured young boy filled everyone's life with joy with his huge smile, especially his grandma. He loved reading. In fact, he loved work from Julia Donaldson, his favourite, the Gruffalo. This love for reading would swiftly turn into a love for learning at school though, with his grandma describing how he would come to her home, excited at the fact he was about to learn 10 new words for a given week. But he loved nothing more than superheroes. DC, Marvel, you name it, Arthur loved it. From Batman to Black Panther, Aquaman to The Flash, he had every costume, every action figure, and for hours on end in his free time at home, he would pretend to take on their superpowers, becoming the superhero. Sadly though, on the 23rd of February 2019, Arthur's straightforward life would be flipped upside down, and this date would essentially start a domino effect of actions that would lead to his eventual murder. But before we continue, I just want to let everyone know that this video will be covering in-depth discussions about child abuse and child torture. Some scenes may be too distressing for some to watch. Again, viewer discretion is advised. 11 AM, February 23rd, 2019. Emergency services are called to Frensham Way, Harborne, Birmingham, to reports of a man being found with several stab wounds. When officers arrived, he was dead. That man, Gary Cunningham, had been found by a delivery driver in the early hours of the morning after being stabbed to death by none other than Olivia Labinjo-Hughes, Arthur's mother. But she didn't make a run for it. In fact, when police came to arrest her, with no emotion, she walked over his dead body. She told police, quote, "He killed himself," but Olivia was arrested at the scene on suspicion of murder, and she would go on to be subsequently charged with exactly that. Olivia went on trial later on in that same year, which seen her convicted of manslaughter. She was jailed for 18 years, but in the Court of Appeal, the verdict was quashed. The central argument being made was whether jurors could have been sure she was not acting in self-defense. So, again, the verdict was quashed and a retrial went ahead. Throughout the second trial, it was heard that the pair had been in a toxic and violent on-off relationship. In November of 2018, the most serious previous incident of violence prior to the killing was in November of 2018. Olivia produced a kitchen knife while in her own home and stabbed Gary in the arm while Arthur was present. It was her word against the families though. She claimed he abused her, but the family of Gary came out to say it was in fact Olivia who had been the abuser, adding that no one was taking it seriously because he was a man. On that specific day though, it's thought the couple had been on a drink and drugs binge before Olivia turned on Gary. Gary had been stabbed 11 times in a frenzied attack and died from a stab wound to his leg. It went into his calf just below the knee. The knife went into his leg about 11 centimeters and severed an artery. He was then propped up against a fire exit door outside of Olivia's flat, and of course the delivery driver found him sometime later. Motionless, surrounded by a lot of blood on the carpet was how the scene was described by that delivery driver. After this retrial went ahead in 2021, Olivia was found guilty once again, and this time was handed an 11-year sentence. After being taken into custody for the murder of Gary Cunningham, Olivia would subsequently lose custody of Arthur, and he was handed to his father, Thomas Hughes, who became the primary carer for his son. Arthur was then moved to Dickenteith Community Primary School in Solihull. His grandma, Joanne Hughes, at this point expressed concerns that Arthur may show detachment issues in the absence of his mother, but believe it or not, the youngster didn't really care too much at all. In fact, he appeared to settle in very well, continuing his life without her. The ease was more than likely due to family members saying Olivia had joined the army. You see, she'd previously served as a reserve. In the same month, February, given the circumstances, Thomas and Arthur moved into Joanne's home, where they lived in a log cabin in the garden. Joanne Hughes would later explain that Arthur was nervous at first, but soon evolved into a happy, well-rounded child. Either way, the months go by and everything starts to feel somewhat normal again. But in August of 2019, the next domino was about to fall in this story. In August of 2019, Thomas would be looking for love, so in comes Emma Tustin, mother of 4. He had met her on Plenty of Fish. The two hit it off instantly, although both had dark pasts. Of course, Thomas's ex-girlfriend, Arthur's mother, by this point was on remand for a murder, whilst Emma had tried to end her own life after throwing herself off the 6th floor of a car park in 2013. But it was after just 3 dates, Thomas introduced Emma to his son Arthur, and the two were said to have bonded over a game of cricket. Emma would go on to say that her and Arthur had become friends straight away. Why so was it only 1 month later though, in September of 2019, Thomas's brother Blake had started to notice changes in behaviour from all three. Thomas had become more strict towards Arthur, and in turn Arthur had started to become more anxious at being told off. Believe it or not, Emma thought she was that comfortable around the family at this point. She even told Blake off, Arthur's uncle, because Blake had bought Arthur a Subway. She claimed it was an unnecessary treat. Although the early signs had been there, it wasn't until March of the following year where the physical abuse would start.
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home. Because the critical thing we must do to stop the disease spreading between households. That is why people will only be allowed to leave their home for the following very limited purposes.
Over the Christmas period of 2019, the relationship between Thomas and his parents became strained. On New Year's Eve, Thomas and his father got into an argument after Thomas's father told him to stop having a go at Arthur over little things. As you can see, the signs were playing out in front of everyone to see. There was also testimonies of Emma hitting Arthur after he had been rude to her, but clearly Thomas didn't care because a short while later he moved into Emma's house. Fast forward to March of 2020, and it's been noted through court documents that this is where the abuse started, but as you can see, it really had been building up to this point. Lockdown probably just made it a whole lot easier for the abuse to be amplified. Over the span of lockdown all the way through to June of 2020, Arthur was subjected to beatings and made to stand on one spot for hours on end. He was forced to sleep downstairs with a blanket whilst Emma's children got to sleep in their beds. Even when Emma's children weren't there though, and the beds were free, little Arthur still had to sleep on the floor downstairs. But the abuse was no secret. No, their family members could see marks on Arthur's body that weren't consistent with accidental bumps or bangs, and they felt they needed to contact the authorities. And that's exactly what they did. Sadly though, their pleas were ignored. On the 16th of April 2020, Joanne Hughes, Thomas's mother, contacted Solihull Council's emergency team to report bruises on Arthur's shoulders. She told them that Arthur said Emma had caused the injuries. By this point, 1 month on or so into lockdown, it's believed she subjected him to face grabs, name-calling, pushing and bumping his head on the stairs. In response to the report, social worker Jane Kavanagh and support worker Angela Scarlett Coppage were dispatched to the family home in Shirley the following day. When they both arrived at the home, Arthur was seen playing outside. Jane said he appeared clean, happy and boisterous, adding that she was unable to spot any bruising other than a faint yellow mark in the middle of his back. After speaking with both Thomas and Emma, Jane and Angela reported that there were no safeguarding concerns, so the case wasn't referred for a full social services assessment. Instead, they offered to put a support worker in touch under the Early Help scheme, but no work took place. 4 days later, on the 20th, a desperate Joanne contacted Arthur's school about the referral to social services she had made in the days prior. Michelle Hull, safeguarding lead at Dickens Heath Community Primary School, proceeded to contact social services to alert them to Joanne's report. But they were told they had no concerns. And believe it or not, at some point after this goes down, Arthur's uncle Daniel had attempted to show police bruises on his young nephew's body. The West Midlands police take them in for evidence but don't get back to the family. It was at this point the family attempted to take justice into their own hands after the authorities had failed them. You see, what had happened was Daniel, along with other relatives, had decided to pay the pair a visit to confront them about what was going on with Arthur. But instead of police investigating the abuse, the West Midlands police actually threatened them with being arrested for breaking COVID rules if the family tried to visit the house again to confront Emma and Thomas. Talking of the incident, Daniel said, "I went to the police web chat to inquire as to what I could do for the safety of my nephew. I had a web chat with an operative. He gave me a case number, and within 10 minutes a private number called me. A police officer identified himself, who said he had been around to the address and spoke with Emma and Tom. We were advised if we were to return to the address, we would be arrested for breaking COVID lockdown rules. I said I had photos of Arthur's injuries, and I didn't believe that if he had seen those injuries, he would be happy that he was okay. He reluctantly received the photos and said he would speak to his sergeant and get back to me. He never did." But the final missed chance came from Emma's stepfather just weeks before Arthur would be murdered at the hands of his own father and stepmum. John Dutton, Emma's stepfather, made a call to social services anonymously as he thought Arthur was in danger. Talking of what he witnessed, he said, "Thomas dished out the discipline on visits to his home, and Thomas admitted to slashing Arthur's Liverpool and Birmingham City football shirts." After this call was made, John even stopped allowing Arthur into his home because his wife was distressed at how he was being treated. One notable incident was when Arthur was ordered to sit at a table and was made to face the wall for hours. But again, nothing came from that social services call, more than likely due to that original report being brushed off by those social workers back in April. Before we get into the next section, I want to warn you all once again that what you're about to see is extremely distressing for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. After putting young Arthur through abuse, Emma and Thomas decided to install CCTV cameras into their own home. They said it was to keep an eye on Arthur. Throughout the CCTV that was eventually recovered by police, it caught glimpses of what the sad last few months of Arthur's life were like. But a lot of the abuse wasn't captured on CCTV. Take for example where he was forced to stand in one spot for hours on end in the hallway, sometimes nearly half a day. Look here as the pair share an ice cream in the heat, while Arthur is forced to stand in one spot by himself. The couple are pictured here sharing a hot tub together. Again, Arthur would have been standing in one spot in the heat, not allowed to move. When Arthur was allowed to move from the spot though to do things such as eat for example, he was given food laced with high amounts of salt. Arthur would reject the majority of his meals. But over 200 voice notes were captured of Arthur crying, screaming, begging for help. In the clips, Arthur would frequently call for his nan and Uncle Blake. In one clip, he repeatedly says, "Blake, no one loves me." It wasn't just physical abuse Arthur was subject to though. Emma would refer to him as devil child, Satan, whilst Thomas referred to him as a weasel and a little pussy. In text exchanges between the pair, they talk of committing horrific acts of violence towards him. Some notable messages that were released to the public were, "I'll go to town on him," "I'll end him," and he also warned, quote, "I'll take his jaw off his shoulders." Thomas had also told Emma to put Arthur outside with the rubbish. On June 15th, 2020, Emma was captured on CCTV waking Arthur up at around 7:06 a.m, ripping his bedding from underneath him on the living room floor, causing him to stand up and cry. She then took him to her hairdresser's home where she got her hair done. For the 6 or so hours they were there, Arthur was made to stand in the doorway. The hairdresser would go on to say that Emma aggressively shouted at him throughout the day, and when Thomas arrived, he grabbed Arthur by the scruff of his neck, told him off, and called him degrading names. As they made their way out, Arthur was said to have collapsed, but the hairdresser said neither of the pair helped him up. At around 6 p.m, they arrived home. Roughly 1 hour later, Thomas picked Arthur up, squeezed him, and hit him with a belt on the legs. Thomas would later describe the force as being 9 out of 10. Thomas then went out for the night, and when he received a text from Emma saying that Arthur had bit her, he responded, "Just end him." When he returned a short while later, he forced Arthur in and out of the kitchen by the scruff of his neck. At roughly 8:30 a.m. on the 16th of June 2020, CCTV captures Arthur struggling to drag his duvet out of the living room. You can see the condition he's in at this point, frail. But like the sad reoccurring theme of this story, Arthur on this day was subjected to abuse once again. You see, Emma, Thomas and Arthur went back to the hairdresser's home so Emma could finish off her hair. The hairdresser recalls Arthur screaming and was told by Emma that he was being pressure pointed by Thomas. This had been one of the ways the pair would abuse him. The hairdresser's boyfriend was present on that day. He saw Arthur and felt extremely sorry for him. He even snuck him a glass of water after he described him as a malnourished, poor little kid who was broken. But by 1 p.m, the trio had left the hairdressers and returned home. At 2 p.m, Emma claimed she'd been doing her eyebrows when out of nowhere Arthur threw himself into her bedroom door, causing it to bounce back into his own head. But the prosecution in the eventual murder trial said they believe at this point Emma subjected Arthur to a salt attack. What do I mean by this? Well, it's been said that Emma forced a large amount of salt down Arthur's throat. This was then followed by a picture of him sitting in the hallway crying. Roughly 15 minutes later, Emma was captured on CCTV getting up off the sofa and heading towards the hallway where Arthur was. She stayed there for 1 minute, and the next thing we know is that Arthur was unresponsive. 2 minutes after this, Emma texted Thomas, "He caught me in the stomach, he won't get up for shit." This was then followed by a call saying he'd knocked himself out by hitting his own head on the floor. And then 12 minutes after the attack took place, this 999 call is made.
Ambulance service, is the patient breathing?
Barely.
Okay, is he breathing right now though, even if
Is he breathing, Tom? He keeps taking big dark breaths. Basically, my 6-year-old stepson is fallen, he's banged his head.
Okay.
And while he was on the floor, he's banged his head another 5 times.
Okay.
He's lost colour, he's got a big lump on his head.
Is he awake?
So what, sorry?
Is he awake?
He's half in and out, but he's banged his head quite hard.
Is his breathing noisy or abnormal?
Is it noisy or abnormal? It's barely there, he's barely breathing, he's in and out, he's taking it hard. He's basically been treating us all like shit. He's threw himself on the floor, he's headbutting the floor. I'm trying to pick him up in the process, he's headbutting me in the process.
Okay.
I've got him up, he was breathing like a little bit better at first.
Yeah.
Washed him down, put some water down him, tried to obviously get him like, a bit more colour in him, but then obviously I've seen the lump on his head that he's done to himself.
Right. Help's been arranged for him. Okay.
Yeah.
Try and keep calm for me. Can you get him
Yeah.
laid out flat on his back?
Flat on his back.
How old is he?
He's 6, nearly 7.
Years old. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, there with me.
He's losing. He's very pale, but obviously it's a big bang. He's knocked himself out by the look of him.
And he's barely breathing now.
He's breathing. He's barely breathing. He's lifeless at the minute.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you how to give basic life support. Okay, so you can just keep going. He's still not responding.
No.
Okay, just keep going for me.
He's
Don't
got
stop.
two big nuts on his head where he's banged himself.
Okay. Just keep going. Don't stop. Just keep going that way. Push, 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 push.
Just briefly, what happened?
Basically, he'd gone out to get me a birthday cake and stuff for the kids. Arthur was told to sit on the thinking step. Arthur's put himself all over the floor. He's banged himself off the radiator. He's hit me. He's kicked me in the process of me trying to get him back on the thinking step. He's then gone on all fours on the floor, and I've told him to get up. And I shut the door over, and all I heard was a crack off the floor. He was headbutting the floor on all fours. Headbutted the floor once, said, "Arthur, get up, you're going to hurt yourself. I've phoned your dad." He went, "I don't care." At that point, he was fine. And then he dropped his head again as I've tried to bear hug him and pick him up, and he headbutted the floor 3 times.
Here on this
carpet? Round about, the door was shut, so if you go in, I'll show you. Because it's probably about here his head was, but it's concrete, there's no underlay under that. But he'd banged his head 3 or 4 times. Obviously, then went to pick him up. He'd knocked himself unconscious. I picked him up, put him on the sofa, poured water in his mouth.
So you come in, he's banged his head 3 or 4 times
I was
here.
in the kitchen, then I'd sat down in the living room and that's when he threw himself on the floor.
And you heard him banging his head.
Him bang his head.
So what did you do?
I came out to him and told him to get up. He told me no. So I tried to bear hug him and put my arms underneath him and pick him up. And he dropped and he banged his head another 3 times off the floor. And as I picked him up, he hit me and he kicked me as I was trying to get him up.
And then what? So, and you went?
I picked him up off the floor.
Yeah.
Tried to put him on the stairs just to get him to, but his head's obviously going out, so I put him straight on the stairs. He said, "Wherever you've got to phone an ambulance."
So he's unresponsive.
Yeah. Like I say, he's like the last 6 months. He's battered both my kids. He's smashed this house to pieces. He's battered his dad. He's hit me. When I tried to get him off the floor from headbutting the floor, he headbutted me and he kicked me and he's hit me. Yesterday we went to my friend's house and he pushed me down 5 stairs. "You're not my real mum, I hate ya. I'm going to get my mum to kill you," he said. Okay. And even so, I've done my best for that kid. He fucking hates me. I tried to get him off the floor.
Emergency services descended on the scene and Arthur was taken to the Birmingham Children's Hospital. That evening, both Emma and Thomas were arrested on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm with intent after young Arthur laid on life support. But the following day, after it was concluded nothing could have been done to save Arthur, it was decided that his machine would be switched off and he was sadly pronounced dead at 1 a.m. on the 17th of June 2020. Medical evidence determined that Arthur died from head trauma inflicted on him by an adult, and he was found at this point with more than 100 bruises on him. So Emma and Thomas, after denying the charges that were brought against them, would go on trial for his murder, to which Emma was eventually found guilty of, while his father Thomas was found not guilty on the murder charge, but was found guilty on the lesser charge of manslaughter. They had also been hit with charges in relation to child cruelty. Emma pleaded guilty to one of those charges on the first day of trial and another one on the final day, but either way she was found guilty on the other 2 counts. Thomas had been cleared of 2 of the child cruelty charges, but was found guilty on 2 of them. For their roles in the killing, Emma was handed a life sentence with the minimum term of 29 years, whilst Thomas was handed a 21-year jail sentence. Over this past year or so, we've taken a look into parents killing their children, but this one is definitely the most shocking and disturbing. I didn't even go over all of the facts of the case and the amount of abuse that this young 6-year-old boy went through. For example, how about the time when a neighbour heard Emma shouting, "Face the wall," and then sometime later Thomas told that exact same neighbour if she hears someone saying "don't kill me," that she should just ignore it. I can't even wrap my head around it. Honestly, I'm so disgusted at this case. I found it extremely difficult to even watch some of the clips, knowing what this boy had gone through. Once having dreams and ambitions of becoming a footballer, to sadly this. But again, where were the social services here? 4 different occasions you had to save this boy's life, but you didn't. How can you just brush off bruises to say that it was rough play? I mean, even Emma's stepdad made the call. If that's not saying something, then I don't know what is. But to make this even worse than it already is, a social care worker who represents the specific people who are keeping tabs on the situation tried to blame lockdown on this whole situation rather than taking a bit of accountability. They know they got it wrong like they have many times before because the director of children's services at the time of Arthur's death, Louise Rees, left before the trial started. When are these agencies going to actually start doing their jobs correctly? How many more children have to die before they start sorting this out? Boris Johnson does see the outcry from the general public though, and has recently backed a proposal that child killers should never see the light of day again as mandatory. Arthur's law would see anyone who carries out murder on children would be locked away in prison indefinitely. But it looks as if both Emma and Thomas are going to have a rough time in jail. No one likes baby killers. Recent news has came out that inmates have laced Emma's meals with salt after discovering what had happened to Arthur. One former inmate said, "What we did was cruel, but what she did to Arthur was crueler."
My name's Detective Inspector Laura Harrison. My role is the Senior Investigating Officer, so I've led a team to investigate the murder of Arthur Labinjo-Hughes. It's been quite a difficult and emotional investigation really. It's really highlighted quite a lot of detail that we don't ordinarily uncover in sort of a child abuse or neglect case, and that's primarily because there was a CCTV camera in the living room. That's picked up about 6 days worth of CCTV footage for us to trawl through and really get a feel for what was happening in that house and how the family were interacting, and it became quite clear quite quickly that Arthur wasn't actually captured that often on the CCTV, and so further evidence in terms of looking at mobile phone footage, videos, audio and text message communication between the 2 defendants really highlighted a campaign of abuse and torture of Arthur that resulted in his death. So it's been quite a complex investigation in terms of the medical evidence that was able to prove that Emma Tustin was in sole care of Arthur at the time the fatal injury was inflicted. But the mobile phone communication between the 2 of them really highlighted that Thomas knew exactly what was happening at all times, because if he wasn't inside the house, he was in communication with Emma Tustin. And so they're both charged with murder and a number of child cruelty offences really to reflect the level of abuse that they subjected Arthur to. So the investigation worked really hard to present a really strong and compelling case against both Emma Tustin and Thomas Hughes. And the verdicts we've received really reflect the painstaking investigation that has taken place, but really important for justice, mainly for Arthur and his wider family as well. It's been really traumatic for them to be exposed to the level of detail that they've had to be, and the wider community as well, just what was going on behind closed doors during a period of time where they had no idea whatsoever. It's been really difficult for them, and therefore this verdict today has been really important for us to reach.
Just to show Arthur him as a nation, that we love him and that we're really, really sorry that he couldn't be helped. We've seen him just before lockdown happened. He used to come and play on my drive with my puppy, and he was always He was always happy, smiling, laughing, just like a really cheeky little boy. And we never knew his name at this stage, so my partner used to call him Cheeky because we didn't know his name. Heartbreaking. I think everybody's just devastated by what's happened. You never expect to be that close to something and to someone so evil. I'm really overwhelmed, very overwhelmed. So grateful for everybody that's come and supported today.